This cheerleader just gave birth and has been arrested, accused of hiding her dead newborn inside of a bin bag in her closet. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is Lakin Snellen. Just last week on the 27th of August, shortly after 10:30 a.m, police in Lexington, Kentucky received a concerned phone call reporting an unresponsive infant. Officers quickly arrived to the Park Avenue address where they would discover the body of a deceased newborn baby, wrapped in a towel, stuffed in a bin bag, and then hidden in a closet. 21-year-old Lakin Snellen, originally from White Pine, Tennessee, was at the scene, and she admitted to being the baby's mother. Lakin is a senior at the University of Kentucky, where she is a part of the stunt cheerleading team. This means that she participates in doing pyramids, being thrown in the air, tosses, tumbling, everything that cheerleaders do. She has been a part of that team for the past 3 seasons, meaning that she did all of this while she was pregnant. It is unknown whether her pregnancy was public knowledge or not, however people find it very hard to believe that nobody knew. At the scene, after being read her Miranda rights, Lakin agreed to speak to the officers, admitting to, quote, concealing the birth by cleaning any evidence, placing all cleaning items used into the black trash bag, including the infant who was wrapped in a towel. As of right now, we do not know the cause of death of the newborn baby, whether the baby was stillborn, murdered, or died of natural causes. Horrifyingly, only minutes away from the Park Avenue address is a safe haven baby box where Lakin could have left the baby in a safe environment where someone would have seen to them. We also do not know the baby's age, whether the baby was born at full term or premature. 21-year-old Lakin was arrested and charged with abuse of a corpse, tampering with bodily evidence, and concealing the birth of an infant. She pleaded not guilty to these charges, and after paying a $100,000 bond, she was released on bail under the circumstance that she returned back to her parents in Tennessee, which she did. She wasn't ordered to wear a tag or an ankle bracelet. She will appear in court again on the 23rd of September.
This teenage girl went missing and her body was turned into kebab meat. Charlene Downs was born in 1989 and moved with her family to Blackpool, England when she was 10. She was described as bubbly, talkative, and from a big family. She spent a lot of her time hanging around the Blackpool Promenade, and it was filled with shops, arcades, bars, and a lot of older men who shouldn't have been communicating with girls her age. On November 1st of 2003, Charlene spent the day with her sister Rebecca hanging out and shopping. Rebecca decided she wanted to go home for the evening, but Charlene wasn't ready to end the day because she wanted to meet up with a friend. Around 7:15 p.m., Charlene's mom walked her to the bus stop, stood with her, talked to her, wanted to make sure that she was going to be safe. Charlene kissed her on the cheek and told her that she wouldn't be home late. Charlene spent the evening with her friend and they went to the Carousel Bar on the North Pier. They were together for several hours before her friend headed back home, but Charlene never made it home. When she didn't come home, her mother reported her as missing, but the police treated her as a runaway. Police didn't seal off any areas, they didn't check any local CCTV footage, they just wasted days. Police spoke with Charlene's friend and she stated the last time that she saw her was around 10 p.m. when they parted ways. Once police looked at CCTV footage around the area, they saw Charlene by herself around 9 p.m. outside of a bar. She was also with an unidentified blonde woman, probably in her 30s, and she has never been identified to this day. The last confirmed sighting of Charlene was around 11 p.m. that day, and after that, she just vanished. Officers interviewed local teens from the area, and they stated that Blackpool's fast food restaurants were full of older men who would groom young girls. They would trade sexual favors for food, alcohol, and cigarettes. There was a total of 11 local businesses doing this, and one in particular kept coming up, and it was called Funny Boys, which was a kebab shop. 2 men who worked there, Iyad and Mohammed, became the focus. Police believe that Charlene had been spending time around them, so they conducted a massive undercover operation and secretly recorded 2,400 hours of audio inside the shop. Detectives were listening to the tapes. They heard them say that Charlene was chopped up and put in the kebabs. In 2007, both men were charged with Charlene's murder, and during trial, they were trying to listen to the audio, but it was so muffled and so low that they couldn't come up with a verdict. A retrial was planned, but it collapsed completely, so the judge threw out the entire case and the 2 men walked out free. To this day, Charlene's body has never been found, no one has been charged, and there is still a reward waiting for someone to speak up about what happened.
This man lied his way into art school, and then weeks later, the students started disappearing, and the school had no idea they just hired a serial killer. Welcome to the series, Serial Killers from Every State, and for Alabama, it's Daniel Lee Sherbert. Daniel's childhood was the kind of horror that you'd hope wasn't real. His dad abused him in ways that I will not repeat, and by 12 years old, Daniel's on the streets, hooked on substances, selling his body just to survive. Now, I'm not telling you this to justify a single thing he did, I just want you to know the kind of monster factory that he came from. Years later, he tries to clean up, joins the Marines under a fake name, Daniel Marlowe. But even that doesn't last. He gets discharged and ends up right back into the streets, and then he snaps. Desperate for money, he unalives 2 young women. He gets arrested, but when he gets out, he just changes his name again to Danny Spence and moves to Alabama. Then somehow he gets hired to teach art at a school for the deaf and blind. While working there, he starts dating one of his students, Sherry, and even bonds with their kids until one day he goes over to their apartment and strangles all 3 of them. Sherry, 5-year-old Chad, and 4-year-old Joseph. Then, like it's nothing, he walks down the hall and strangles another woman named Linda Jarman, and then he steals her car. And no one knows why he unalived her. Maybe she saw something, or maybe he just wanted to. That's the scary thing about serial killers. Sometimes they don't need a motive. It took 5 days for anyone to notice that they were gone. Sherry wasn't showing up to school or answering any of her calls. So the school called the apartment manager, and when the manager opened the door, he found Sherry and the boys under a blanket, and their bodies were cold and bluish purple. The cops go and check on Linda. The TV still on, and her body is right there. Same MO. No signs of struggle and strangle. That same week, another body shows up. 19-year-old Cheryl Evans, a black sex worker. She was found dumped on the side of the road. Still, no one knows who's doing this, and they definitely were not suspecting the art teacher. But then Daniel did a big mistake. Remember Linda's stolen car? Police found it abandoned in Kentucky near this really sketchy campsite. Inside, they found a pile of women's underwear and a birth certificate with the name Danny Ray Spence. Then they matched fingerprints from the crime scene to the car, and boom. Daniel Lee Sherbert, who police discovered had previously unalived someone, and just like that, the manhunt for a serial killer is on. For 6 months, Daniel manages to outsmart the police and hide, but then one day, he makes another mistake. He calls a friend from a payphone in Tennessee, and police manage to trace it. They show his mugshot to a local restaurant, and turns out he was doing odd jobs there. The next day, when he shows up for work, they were waiting for him. Police arrest him, and he confesses to 5 murders in Alabama. Sherry, her 2 sons, Linda Garman and Linda Odom. And when they ask how many total people he's killed, he shrugs and says maybe a dozen, maybe more. I try to put those things out of my head. That line will forever haunt me. In 1987, Daniel gets the death sentence for the Alabama murders and life for Linda Odom. But even in prison, he's still drawing sketches of women in violent, disturbing positions. And the part that kills me is that he has fans. Like, women would write to him and they would fangirl over him. Like, what is this obsession that people have with serial killers? In 2007, his execution date was finally set, but before the state can end him, cancer beats them. And I don't know if that's really justice, but thank you for being here. You guys are my crime-solving besties. I will see you in my next video. Group hug.
This 34-year-old teacher essayed her 5th grade student for years and then had his baby. I feel like I come across so many cases like this nowadays. It's so common, and that makes me want to throw up. 34-year-old Laura Karen lived in New Jersey, where she was a teacher at Middle Township Elementary School, and Laura Karen allegedly essayed her 5th grade student from 2016 to 2020. In 2016, the student was only 11 years old. I honestly couldn't find that much background on Laura, but this is what we do know. She was born and raised in Pennsylvania. She attended a Roman Catholic school in high school and then went on to study at Cabrini University. There she was an athlete. She played basketball, and she was studying to earn a degree as an elementary education major. In December of 2014, Laura got a job working as a 5th grade teacher at Middle Township Elementary School, which is where she met today's victim and his siblings. We don't know the victim's name. Obviously, he was underage at the time, but we're just going to be referring to him as Boy A. Boy A has 2 siblings. Laura actually met his sister first. His sister was one of her first students, and she also coached the sisters' basketball team. The year after, Boy A becomes one of her students, and it was around that time that Laura began befriending their parents. Boy A's mom often volunteered at the school, and the more and more that Laura started talking to her, the closer that they got, to the point where Laura began constantly offering to babysit her children, Boy A, his sister, and his brother. And it's unclear exactly how this came to be. That information has not been released, and honestly, I have a lot of questions. But Laura started babysitting the kids. They were coming over often, and then they started sleeping over once and twice a week until 2016, because by 2016, Boy A and his brother were living with Laura full time. The sister has since then spoke out in regards to their living situation as to why her brothers moved in with Laura, and it sounds like she isn't entirely sure either as to why her brothers brothers moved in with Laura, but she says that she was a child and to her it didn't seem weird because that was all that she knew. She now realizes though that they were being completely manipulated by Laura. So boy A and his brother are living full-time with Laura. The sister doesn't move in, but she still sleeps over from time to time. And both siblings started noticing odd behavior between Laura and boy A. It's estimated that around this time Laura was 28 and boy A was 11 years old. The kids shared a bedroom on the second floor of the house, and the boys would fall asleep in that bedroom, but then the brother would wake up and boy A would always be in Laura's bed. Then it escalated, and allegedly when boy A would walk into the bathroom to go and take a shower, Laura would walk in behind him and close and lock the door. His brother often saw both of them walking out of the bathroom together, both only wearing towels. His brother has also said that one night when he was supposed to be sleeping, he saw Laura approach boy A and SA him underneath blankets. From what we know so far, most of the alleged SA happened inside of that house, and it's been reported that boy A was SA'd by his teacher Laura Karen about twice a week from 2016 to 2020, making that at least 416 SA events. And then Laura gets pregnant, and she's very happy about this pregnancy. She throws herself a baby shower and tells all of her family and friends that the father isn't in the picture. She gives birth to her baby in 2019 when the baby's father, boy A, was only 13 years old. And according to his brother, following the birth of the baby, boy A then moves in full-time in Laura's bedroom, no longer sharing the bedroom on the second floor with his brother. Then at some point, the kid's mother and Laura have a falling out. It's unclear why or what exactly happened, but I think at the end of 2020, the kids moved out of Laura's house. All of this came to light in December of 2024 when boy A's father saw a picture of Laura Karen and her child on social media, and he saw the picture and thought, wait a second, this baby looks just like my son. He sees this picture on social media, immediately notices the big resemblance that the baby has with his son. He knows that Laura is his son's teacher. He obviously knew that his son was living with Laura full time. He connects the dots and immediately realizes that this baby is his son's. So then he makes a social media post about this, stating that he thinks that his son is the father, and allegedly after the father's post, boy A messages his sister and his brother and confesses that he did have a physical relationship with Laura, and he also confesses that he is the father of the baby. He then allegedly asked his sister not to tell anyone because he didn't want Laura to get in trouble. However, that post then makes its way up to the school Middle Township, which is when it lands on the desk of the superintendent. The superintendent immediately places Laura Karen on administrative leave and then calls the police to report this. An investigation begins, and in January of 2025, 34-year-old Laura Karen was arrested and charged with first-degree second-degree endangerment to the welfare of a child. Laura and boy A had remained in contact up until her arrest. After her arrest, the prosecutor stated, quote, "This arrest underscores the unwavering commitment of our office and law enforcement partners to protect the children in our community. Teachers hold a position of great trust, and the allegations in this case represent a deeply troubling breach of that trust," end quote. She is currently being held at the Cape May County Correctional Center awaiting trial. The SA allegedly began when he was 11 years old. He became a father at 13 years old. I don't care what you say. I don't even want to listen to whatever her defense is going to state. That is SA. He was a child. You are a full-grown adult. Case closed. Anyway, that's all I have for today's video. You better believe that I'm going to be keeping an eye on this case because what the fuck. Thank you guys for spending time with me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
Do you guys believe this man or not? Watch this comment and then see if you were right by the end of the video.
Because I couldn't get Valentine's Day off, we swapped cards upstairs. I gave her a kiss and a cuddle, got ready for work. And she was going to get her head down for another hour or so.
What does Joanne mean to you?
She's the only person I truly love. I want to know where she is. I want her back.
It was Valentine's Day 2005 in Hull. Joanne Nelson was a stunning 22-year-old woman who just always kept her friends and family on their toes. She was full of life, always laughing, always joking. She was kind of the type of girl that you never really knew what she was going to come out with next. Her friends described her as mischievous but lovable. But one thing that she always was reliable. Like, if she said that she was going to be somewhere, she would be there, especially work. Which is why it was so bizarre when she vanished. Now, her fiancé Paul reported her missing to the police when she failed to show up at work that day. He was like, it was so weird. We woke up on Valentine's Day together, we exchanged cards, and then she just vanished into thin air. She was supposed to drive to work, but I later on just found her car unlocked, and she obviously was nowhere to be seen. He was devastated. He went on national TV crying, begging for her to come back. But people were really suspicious of him early on, and honestly, it's so hard to tell, which is why I'm so interested whether you guys believe him or not. I've seen murderers get called out, rightly so, for acting really dodgy in interviews, but I've also seen innocent people be accused of doing horrific things and then get found innocent later. I'm like, can you really tell from somebody's interview whether they're telling the truth or not? Can you really trust body language? So everyone saw his interview and they were like, he just looks dodgy. And one thing that people really couldn't get past were the scratch marks on his hand. I don't know if the camera crew was zooming in on his hands on purpose to kind of emphasize the fact of, look, he's got scratches on his hands, but it certainly helped police. People were like, are those claw marks? Was Joanne trying to fight for her life? Paul was adamant though. He was like, we were a happy couple, we were engaged, we were planning a wedding, like, why would I kill my fiancé? But when police started looking into CCTV to try and retrace Joanne's last steps, they found something that they were not expecting. Footage of Paul, the day before she was reported missing, buying cleaning supplies and bin bags. Why do you need cleaning supplies and bin bags just before Valentine's, Paul? I'm gonna guess you weren't just trying to be helpful around the house. And when police dug into Paul's past, they were absolutely horrified. He'd actually been married before, and his ex-wife had been through honestly hell and back with this man. He'd knocked her unconscious and even choked her to the point where she blacked out. And it seemed to run in the family because Paul's own dad was a killer. He'd actually stabbed somebody to death and spent time in prison. And just a couple of days after Joanne went missing, Paul spoke to one of his friends, and the friend was like, don't worry, mate. He was trying to reassure him. He was like, don't worry, she will come back. And you know what Paul said to this? No, she won't. I know she is dead and gone, and she's not coming back. Eventually, Paul was caught red-handed when his own mother reported him to the police. She said she knew for a fact that he'd actually confided in a friend that he killed Joanne. He admitted to strangling Joanne to death in an argument over laundry. He then wrapped her body in bin bags and drove miles to dispose of her body. But maybe the most chilling part of all of this is he actually pleaded guilty, so he only got 17 years behind bars. And unsettlingly for the people of Hull, he's now free.
The serial killer cannibal who fed his victims to customers at his barbecue food stand. This case is disturbing, disgusting, heinous. It's almost not even human, and this is definitely not the video that you're going to want to be eating while watching. Have you guys ever heard of Joe Metheny? We know very little about his childhood. What we do know is that his father passed away in a car accident when he was very young, leaving his mother, a struggling single mom of 6 kids, where she was forced to work like 4 jobs, work overtime just constantly. Joe claims that he had a terrible childhood, and because of how often his mother worked, that he was very much neglected. But his mother says that, she was doing the best that she could to provide for her family, and because of how hard she was working, her children never went without food or a roof over their heads. Joe's mother also says that her son was a very normal child. He was almost perfect. He was very, very smart, and he never got in any trouble. When Joe turned 18, he joined the army, and he was also studying physics at this time, but sadly, this was also when he developed an addiction to hard substances. When Joe left the army, he chose not to go home. He lived on the streets of Baltimore. He was homeless, he was a drifter, continuing to use hard substances. And this would be Joe's life for many, many years. In his late 30s, Joe met a lady. She was also homeless, also an addict, and he ended up getting her pregnant. For the next handful of years, Joe really tried to turn his life around. He attempted to get clean. He put his girlfriend and his son in like a real home. He got like a really good job. He was a truck driver for a pallet company, and everything was good until one summer night in 1994 when everything changed. Joe came home one night after a long week on the road to find that his girlfriend had left him for another man, a substance dealer, and she took everything in the home with her, including their 6-year-old son. And after losing his son, Joe suffered what I could only describe as a mental breakdown. He began using hard substances again, but now even more frequently, if that was even possible. He lost his job and was living back on the streets. Despite Joe's life choices and also his outward appearance, he's this big
big, intimidating guy covered in tattoos, Joe was always described as being super kind, super friendly. He was like that big teddy bear type. But after Joe's girlfriend's betrayal, he had this hate in his heart. He also had, this devastating loss of losing his son. He could not find him anywhere. Pairing that with all these hard substances he was using constantly, it was like something switched in Joe's brain. For months, Joe searched for his ex-girlfriend and his son. He ended up hearing from a mutual friend that his ex-girlfriend and her new man had gotten arrested, and his son was now in foster care. Unable to get custody of his son because he was a homeless addict, he was at a standstill, and he decided that his girlfriend and her new man had to die. He ended up hearing from another friend on the streets that his ex-girlfriend and her new man were being released from prison, and they had planned that night to go under this local bridge to buy substances. So Joe decided that he was going to show up too. It was the middle of the night. He starts walking towards the bridge with an axe in his hand. But once he got to the bridge, his girlfriend and her new man were gone. The only people there were two homeless men sleeping on a mattress, and they were both high. So Joe wakes these men up and he's like, yo, where's my girlfriend? Where's my girl? And the men say, hey, she was just here, but she bought substances. She used them with us and then she left. He decided to take his anger out on these two men that he barely knew with his axe, and then he left their bodies on the mattress that they were just sleeping on moments earlier. After leaving the bridge, Joe is in this frenzy type state. He's on all these substances. He just starts randomly going up to random people saying, where is she? Where's my girl? He ends up using his axe to kill two workers that he didn't even really know, and then he attempted to dump their bodies in a nearby river, but he was caught by a dock worker who was working the midnight shift, so Joe says that he killed him as well and also put his body in the river. Joe has gone from being a seemingly normal, kind person to having killed 5 people in one night. Those 2 men that Joe killed under the bridge and left them on that mattress, their bodies were not found, or at least reported to be found, for 3 weeks. But once they were, Joe was suspected and he was brought into custody. But unfortunately, they acquitted him and he was back on the streets. With Joe's name now cleared, he ended up getting his job back at that pallet company, and his boss even allowed him to live on the property of the company and sleep in a trailer that was on the property. For some reason that is unclear, Joe decided that he no longer felt the need to find his ex-girlfriend, get revenge on her, or even find his son, but he still had this hate inside of him. He began luring women back to his trailer with the promise of giving them substances or, something else, and he would kill them. And one night after killing one of these women, he was so out of his mind on substances that he said that he ate her and that he liked it. And I cannot understand this man's logic here. I don't understand why he chose to do this, but Joe claims that he ended up opening up a barbecue food stand on the side of the street where he would sell sandwiches of his victims, and that people were unknowingly eating his victims and that they liked it. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. I will get sick if I keep talking about the details of that part of this case, and I'm not even kidding, because while I was actually researching this case, I ended up feeling very sick and dry heaving. So that's all I'm talking about when it comes to that detail. One of these women were luckily able to escape Joe. This was a woman that Joe had known for years. He lured her back to his trailer with promises of giving her substances, and when she was there, he attempted to SA her and threatened to bury her back in the yard with the rest of the girls before she was able to fight him off and escape. Joe was scared that this woman was going to bring the police back to him, and he decided that he needed to get rid of evidence, more importantly, get rid of the bodies of his victims that he had buried on the property. And remember, this is not his house. This is the property of the place that he worked. But since Joe was using all these substances, he says that his memories from this time were really foggy. A lot of it was a blur. He did not even remember where he had buried his own victims. So Joe decided to call up one of his friends. He was actually a co-worker. He worked for the same company, a man named Clint. And he told Clint, I need help moving a body. Clint comes over, and Joe even shows him where one of the victims were that he remembered burying. And then Clint goes, hey man, yeah, I'm gonna help you with that, but there's something I need to do at home real quick. I'll be right back. And then Clint goes to his boss and says, hey man, Joe's killing girls and burying them on your property. And you'll never guess what Joe and Clint's boss said to Clint, but his boss said, don't tell anyone about this and forget you saw anything. So this part of the case gets a little confusing, but I'm going to try and explain it to the best of my abilities. So Joe and Clint's boss at this time was actually being investigated by the FBI for a possible involvement in organized crime. So when Clint comes to him and says that there might be women buried on his business's property, this man doesn't need any more like heat on him and his company, so that's why he told Clint to forget you saw anything. But the boss's son was actually in cahoots with the FBI. He was like turning his dad in, so the boss's son ended up giving Clint his contact at the FBI. Imagine this FBI agent's shock. He's working on a case of like organized crime and then just stumbles upon a serial killer. So Joe and his boss were both arrested. Joe made a full confession. He, told them everything. They ended up finding 2 bodies on the property, but because Joe was so out of his mind, he tried to help them find more, but they were unable to ever find more. But they were able to link him to a total of 5 murders definitively. Although Joe claims that he killed at least 10 women this way, and then you have those other 5 from years earlier. Joe was sentenced to death, but that ended up being overturned, and then he was sentenced to life in prison, where he passed away behind bars at the age of 62 in the year of 2017. And because I'm sure you guys are gonna ask, Joe's boss ended up getting 10 years in prison for his involvement in organized crime and also trying to cover up the fact that his employee Joe was a serial killer. This case is so disgusting, but it really shocks me how Joe was, this really good kid. He joined the army, he was studying physics, he was this nice guy, and then he became this grotesque serial killer. I blame drugs. You need to stay away from hard drugs. They can really, really change a person. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know all your guys' thoughts in the comments. Let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow.
He ended her life when she wouldn't convert to his religion and marry him. 21-year-old Nikita Tamar was a college student from India, and she was described as smart, quiet, and focused on school. She had dreams of joining the civil services one day to impress her family. But for years, she dealt with obsessive harassment from a guy named Tausif, who was a former classmate of hers who became fixated on her since they were teenagers. Nikita and her family actually reported him in the past because he kept pressuring her to convert religions to marry him, and when she said no, he would not leave her alone. Even after police warnings, he kept stalking her everywhere she went. Tausif would watch her social media, wait outside her house, and even try to kidnap her once. On October 26 of 2020, around 3 p.m., Nikita had just finished an exam at her school, and she is walking towards the gates of the campus with her friend. She had no idea that Tausif and his friend Rihan were waiting in a white car just yards away. Seconds later, Tausif jumps out of the car, grabs Nikita's arms, and tries to force her into the vehicle. At this point, he was shouting at her, demanding that she go with him, but she refused and backed away. Since she is refusing to get into his car, Tausif pulls out a gun, and in broad daylight, in front of teachers, in front of students, in front of a CCTV camera, he fires a single shot into her chest. Nikita collapses on the sidewalk, and Tausif gets back into his car and speeds away. Nikita was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately didn't survive. CCTV footage circulated across India within hours, and it sparked a nationwide outrage. Within a few hours, police arrest Tausif and his friend Rihan. During the interrogation, he admitted to unaliving Nikita because she refused to marry him. Nikita's father claimed that this was not the first time and that Tausif had been stalking his daughter for at least 2 years. In 2021, both men were found guilty and convicted, and Tausif was sentenced to life in prison. Nikita's case sparked national debates about stalking laws and violence towards women in India, and many claimed that the system failed her long before the shooting happened.
This 15-year-old girl killed her father to be with her 19-year-old boyfriend. But this case is most well known for having the most bizarre police interrogation in all of true crime.
We can do this the nice way, or we can do it the hard way and I can release my bipolar.
Aaron Fryer was the father to 3 daughters, his oldest child being 15-year-old Ellie. Ellie was known to be incredibly intelligent and also very bright for her age, but she was also said to be incredibly manipulative. Raising Ellie through her teen years was not easy on Aaron. Allegedly, when Ellie was only 13 years old, she was caught sleeping with another student on the school bus. Somehow things only got worse when she turned 15 and got a new boyfriend, 19-year-old Gavin. Gavin is a very odd and sleazy character in today's case. He was the kind of older, creepy guy that would hang around outside the local middle school to try and pick up preteen girls. There was also a running joke at Gavin's high school, which is not funny at all. This is not a funny joke, but students would say that if there was ever going to be an active shooter at school, that it would most likely be Gavin. And when it came out that 19-year-old Gavin had started dating 15-year-old Ellie, he lost a majority of his friends and was bullied so badly at school that he dropped out of high school only 3 months short of graduation. And obviously, Ellie's father, Aaron, did not approve of this relationship. He tried to forbid Ellie from seeing Gavin. He threatened Gavin with a firearm to stay away from his underage daughter, and when none of it seemed to work, he actually pressed charges against Gavin for statutory SA. Ellie is only 15, and when you're 15, you think that your relationship is your entire life and you would die without this person. So she began to scheme with her boyfriend, Gavin, and also Gavin's older friend, a 22-year-old boy named Russell, on how she could escape her father and be with her boyfriend. Ellie's original plan was that she would just run away and be with Gavin, but it was actually the friend Russell's idea that they should just get rid of her father so he couldn't go out looking for her, and Ellie thought that this was a great idea, that they would just kill her father, but her boyfriend Gavin did not want to commit murder. So Ellie spent the next handful of months trying to convince Gavin to go along with Russell's plan to kill her father. She told Gavin that her father was actually the abusive predator in her life and he was doing a lot of inappropriate things with her. And she also told Gavin that she was pregnant and it was his job to protect her and their unborn child. We've never been able to confirm or deny if Ellie's accusations against her father were real, but we do know with 100% certainty that Ellie was never pregnant. She never thought she was pregnant, and this was only a way to manipulate Gavin to go along with this plan, and it worked because he did agree to kill her father. On September 30th, 2017, Gavin and Russell attempted to break into Aaron's home only to retreat after they saw that Aaron's girlfriend was also spending the night. So they came back a couple days later on October 2nd to commit the grisly act. When Gavin snuck in through the bedroom window, he actually tripped over a trash can and woke up Ellie's father, Aaron. Ellie apologized to her father and said that she was the one who tripped over the trash can when she was going to the bathroom. And her father said, "Oh my gosh, please stop scaring me," because he was still spooked over these mysterious people trying to break into his house only a few nights earlier. So Aaron quickly went back to bed, and then Ellie went and grabbed a metal baseball bat that her father had put near the door for protection because of this recent break-in. It's like some weird sense of like irony, I think, in her head to use this item that he was using to protect himself to commit the murder against him. She gave it to her boyfriend Gavin, and then he beat her father to death while he slept. And all of this is happening while Ellie's two younger sisters are awake in the other room and they're listening to the entire thing. Gavin and Russell then took Aaron's body to his own trunk of his own car, and then all three of them left with $40 that they had stolen from Aaron's wallet. They then dumped Aaron's body in a nearby embankment and abandoned his car, and then just took off on foot and were walking around the neighborhood. A neighbor actually heard these chilling noises that were coming from next door and called a wellness check on her neighbor. First responders went to the home. They found Aaron and his oldest daughter Ellie missing, but there was a large pool of blood where Aaron usually slept. Within hours, they found Ellie, Gavin, and Russell just walking around the neighborhood and brought them into custody, and shortly later they did find Aaron's body and his car. Now we're gonna get into the most bizarre, strangest police interrogations that have ever been conducted in true crime history. While being questioned, 15-year-old Ellie was extremely uncooperative. She denied even being Ellie. She said that she was an 18-year-old girl named Rain. She would refuse to speak, and when she did speak, it would just be lies.
Hi. Hello. Are you Ellie? No. What's your name? I have the right to remain silent.
And on the other hand, Russell was extremely cooperative. He would not stop yapping. He was very helpful, very friendly, and very normal with the detectives while he was speaking to them. But then when the detectives left the room, Russell's personality completely changed, and he became an almost cartoon villain.
Now here's the thing. I know the cops' twisted little pathetic rule game. And actually, sometimes I like to think that I invented the rule book. I'm not exactly bragging, but I use reverse psychology. You want to play hardball? I played baseball when I was younger. I wouldn't go there. And I know everything that I'm saying is being recorded, and I'm doing it on purpose. I can easily turn the speaker off and rant, and then you guys will come in thinking I'm a loony because you don't hear me. You do know I know you're listening, right? So listen here. Ellie Fryer is my client, my protectee. I would like to see her. Asking. Being polite. I know you're looking directly at me, aren't you? The information I gave is not worth $6. It's worth a lot more. So, we can do this the nice way and we negotiate, or we can do it the hard way and I can release my bipolar. Let's make a deal. 1, thanks for the food. 2, I see Ellie and Gavin because they are both under my protection. 3, before you release Ellie to her parents, or parent, do a background check as well as a DNA test, as well as, well, not DNA, a drug test. And if you find out that her parent, her mom, is in fact doing drugs, you are to release her to me. Tell him to release Gavin and Ellie. Thank you. And I know I'm being recorded. You can keep that on there. Unless you're a nice cop, then I take it back. But if you're one of those two-timing, donut-eating piece of crap that don't like rules, a high school bully with a badge, I'm sorry, buddy, but I eat high school bullies for breakfast. I'm not demanding, I'm asking nicely. As a kind civilian that also knows how to manipulate cops.
Gavin was the only one to just skip the dramatics and make a full confession, but none of them would ever express any remorse for what they did to Ellie's father, Aaron. About 5 hours into Ellie's interrogation, she began to speak with the detectives, but she was using a baby voice. It was clearly a fake voice. She was also drawing pictures with crayons that the detectives gave her. I think she's trying to act like she's younger than she actually is. 15 is young, but she's acting like a 6-year-old. She was telling the investigators that her father was abusive and he deserved to die, but that her and her boyfriend were innocent, and she put all the blame on Russell. At one point, Ellie actually tried to negotiate with the investigators, make a little deal that if they let her and her boyfriend go off these murder charges, that she would tell them about minors that she knew that were smoking grass. Ultimately, Gavin did plead guilty and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Ellie also pled guilty and was sentenced to 25 years with the chance of early release after 20 with good behavior. And Russell originally pled no contest and was sentenced to 15 years, but then later took a plea deal and pled guilty with the sentence of 7.5 years with a chance of parole after only 3. This case is incredibly controversial for so many reasons. We could talk about the complexities forever. For one thing, Russell, who got the lightest sentence, was the oldest person in this conspiracy. He was 22, the other people were 19 and 15. He received, the chance of parole after 3 years. It was his idea to commit this murder, and he had the largest hand in actually planning it. Then you have Gavin, who got the harshest sentence, and it was him who actually did commit the murder. But there's some people who say that he was manipulated because he was originally unwilling, and then, she lied about being pregnant, but I don't buy it at all. I think Gavin needs to be in prison 100%. And then when it comes to Ellie, people feel very differently. She was said to be extremely intelligent and gifted, and a lot of people believe that even at 15 years old, she was far more intelligent than her two adult male counterparts in this conspiracy, that she was the mastermind of the entire thing. While other people say that she was only a child, she was being, groomed by this predator. And they also do believe her accusations against her father with the abuse, and that she was so desperate to get away from her father that she lied about being pregnant. Because she was that desperate to escape her father. I'm really, really interested to get your guys' takes on this case. I'm going to be reading every single comment because this case is so insane and so complex. And then you have the interrogations clips just on top of that. So definitely let me know all your guys' thoughts in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video.
No, I have an idea. Can you maybe take 5 minutes, 5 seconds to at least pretend to be upset about your wife's passing? To be there for your children for 5 seconds and at least pretend that you care a little bit. One of your children who just saw the most scarring thing she will ever have to see. What's going on? Sabrina Zunick was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and the life that she was born into was really unstable. The relationship between her parents was very toxic. Both of her parents had criminal records. She was primarily raised by her grandma, but she got caught up hanging out with the wrong crowd, which eventually led her to be sent to a behavioral institute when she was only 14 years old. When she got out, she was placed in the foster care system, and in 2011, when she was 16 years old, she was placed in foster care with Lisa and Kevin Knoffel in Willoughby Hills in Ohio. Kevin was a truck driver, Lisa was a social worker, and the two of them had 2 children together. They had fostered kids before, but Sabrina was the first teenager, and they've been described to be a lovely family. And when Sabrina moved in with them, she fit right in. She got along with the girls, she was doing well in school, she was making friends, things were looking promising for her, but that didn't last long. Because sooner than later, Sabrina started growing this deep resentment towards her foster mother, Lisa. She despised the rules and restrictions that Lisa had in place, and she also felt that Lisa gave way more attention to her own biological daughters than she did to Sabrina. She felt like she treated her own daughters completely different than the way that she treated Sabrina, which then only added to the tension between them, which is when Sabrina turned to her foster father, Kevin, because she found it way easier to talk to him about how she was feeling rather than go to Lisa. Kevin was Sabrina's go-to person. She went to him for absolutely everything, and he was always there for her. And the two of them began creating this really strong bond, and it was cute and it was sweet until it wasn't, and it was weird, and then it got to be too much. And it got to a point where it did feel like, okay, what is really going on here? For example, Kevin would often ask Sabrina to sit on his lap. Remember, she's 16 years old. He would often give her compliments, but in the way that you would compliment someone romantically, not in a father-daughter way. He would ask her to massage his inner thighs, which she often did. And Sabrina's friends started to notice, to the point where they started describing Kevin as a really strange, very touchy man. Lisa, his literal wife, also began to notice, and it made her feel uncomfortable, obviously, so that only added to the tension between her and Sabrina. And at the same time, their whole little weird thing they had going on was just flat out kind of ruining Lisa and Kevin's marriage, because Lisa just felt weird and uncomfortable. And they started growing more and more distant until eventually they started talking about getting a divorce. What people didn't know is that Sabrina and Kevin did have a physical romantic relationship, and their whole physical thing stemmed from those inner thigh massages, and it escalated and escalated until eventually they went all the way together, if you know what I mean. And now they were in this full-blown relationship. Kevin slowly but surely began to paint this picture for Sabrina, telling her that he would divorce his wife Lisa, her foster mom, and that afterwards the two of them could be happily ever after and run off into the sunset together. There was only one problem though. Problem being that Kevin wanted to keep the custody of the children that he had with Lisa, and he was never going to be able to do that if Lisa was still around. So in his little tiny little brain, he decided that the only option was to get Lisa out of the picture permanently, forever. And if they did that, then it would work out perfectly, because then he could be with Sabrina, they could live happily ever after, and they could do so from the money from Lisa's life insurance policy. So it was the perfect plan. So one day, Kevin pitches the idea of murdering his wife Lisa to his, I guess you could call her little girlfriend, also foster child, Sabrina. And she's on board. She's like, yeah, okay, cool, let's do it. So they start going out looking for people they can hire to do the job for them, but they can't find anyone. So Kevin says, hey, what do you think if you were the one to murder her? And Sabrina, 18 years old at this point, is like, I don't really love the idea of me having to do it by myself. But Kevin amps up his manipulation tactics tactics, and in a very emotional state, he goes to Sabrina and tells her that he is so miserable in his marriage. He said he was so miserable to the point that if Lisa wasn't out of the picture, then he would unalive himself. So it was either him or Lisa. This is what he's telling Sabrina. And Sabrina, who has been absolutely brainwashed by this man in his 40s, eventually agrees because she became so blinded by, I guess, what she thought was love, when in reality it was everything but she was willing to do this for Kevin and the beautiful life and future they could have together. So they come up with a plan. They first pick a date, November 15th, and the plan was that this was going to be a staged robbery, a robbery gone wrong. Kevin would be at work driving his truck so he would have an alibi, and Sabrina would use a sharp weapon from the kitchen to murder Lisa as she slept to get her in her most vulnerable state so that she wouldn't see it coming and she wouldn't be able to fight back, and then Sabrina would stage the house as a crime scene to look like a robbery gone wrong. And that's exactly what happened. While Lisa slept, Sabrina approached her with a sharp weapon and completely overpowered her. Lisa woke up in a complete panic, started yelling at the top of her lungs, which then woke up her 13-year-old daughter, who came running into the bedroom and saw the most traumatizing thing. She was absolutely horrified, and rightfully so, and she called 911 immediately. But tragically, by the time that authorities showed up to the house, it was too late. Lisa was gone. And in a heartbreaking detail, officers found the youngest kid, 3-year-old Haley, hiding in the bedroom closet. Sabrina Zunick had used the weapon on Lisa 178 times in the neck, torso, head, eyes, arms, and legs. 178 times. It was so brutal that the sharp weapon had bent because she was using that much force on it. It's vile, it's sickening. Sabrina herself had multiple injuries of her own, and she appeared to be in complete shock. She was taken into custody, but she refused to speak when investigators finally did question her. Authorities then contacted Kevin Knopfel, who was away in Michigan at the time, to let him know the tragedy that just happened inside of his house and that his wife was gone. And when he returned home, officers noted in court records that he seemed to be, quote, relatively calm, and he was way more concerned about the details of what happened and how everything went down than he was emotionally shaken by the entire situation. And only hours, not days, hours after the fact, Kevin calls the insurance company to try and collect the money from Lisa's life insurance policy, and then he went on a massive shopping spree. Like, actually, sorry, what is going on? Can you please pretend for 5 minutes that you are concerned, that you want to be there for your daughter who just walked in on your wife being murdered? Like, we get it, you don't care, that part is obvious. At least pretend, at least for your daughters. What are you actually doing? Sabrina Zunick was obviously arrested. She was being held in custody awaiting trial, and she was not happy. After Lisa was gone, Sabrina was expecting Kevin to be right by her side, not only helping cover for her, but doing everything in his power to make sure that she got away with it, or at least try, but he wasn't. And Sabrina was pissed, but also really sad because he had sold her this dream that started off by getting rid of Lisa, but once that was done, Kevin was nowhere to be found, and Sabrina felt completely abandoned. Which, like, good, you took an innocent woman's life. I don't feel sorry for you. You should be behind bars for the rest of your life. But anyway, because she now felt very alone in the entire situation, in early August of 2013, Sabrina agreed to cooperate with investigators finally, and she told them everything. She told them that her and Kevin came up with this plan together. She spilled the beans about everything in regards to Kevin's involvement. And she said that she was more than willing to testify against Kevin in court for the role that he played in the murder of his own wife. And with her confession, 43-year-old Kevin Knopfel was arrested on August 9th and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and complicity to murder, as well as 6 counts of battery. His trial began in May of 2014, and Sabrina's testimony was the biggest piece of evidence that the prosecution had against him. And after deliberating for 9.5 hours, the jury found him guilty on all counts, 11 counts. He was sentenced to life in prison and will not be eligible for parole until 2043, when he is 73 years old. And because Sabrina told officers the entire truth, the whole thing, the whole plan, that of course included her involvement in the murder as well. And for that, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years, meaning that she will first be eligible for parole in 2042 when she is 47 years old. Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing you are. But that is all I have for today's story. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. Let me know what you think about this case, because what the Anyway, love you so much. Hope you're having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
A group of men dressed in orangutan like a woman put lipstick on her, perfume, and then paid money to sex with her over and over again. I wish I was lying, but they called her Pony, and what she went through, I can't even put into words how disgusting it is. They ripped her away from her mom, who was like and sold her into the illegal wildlife trade. She ended up in a place where women were being sold to in Indonesia. They chained her to a wall, they shaved her entire body down, they rubbed perfume into her skin like it was lotion, smeared lipstick all over her face. I mean, she was just a baby, an animal, and they wanted to make her look like a woman. And at night, men would come in and they'd be given a choice. Do you want a woman tonight or do you want pony? And they would choose pony. That is actually so disgusting, and it comes to show you that men will do it to anything and anyone. But the worst part is everyone in that town knew, everyone, and they didn't try to hide it. And anytime police tried to step in, the town would literally fight them off. And this was her life for 6 years, until finally, after multiple failed rescue attempts, they launched a full-blown military aid just to get her out. But the way that they found her is what breaks my heart. She did not resist, she didn't even run, she just laid there like this is life. She was crawling with parasites, her skin was raw and infected, she was too weak to eat, too weak to even care. Pony was taken to the Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation, and piece by piece they started the impossible task to rebuild her life. They fed her, they let her sleep, they gave her the tiniest bits of peace, and slowly, really slowly, she started to heal. But she'll never go back to the wild because she can't. Humans broke her that badly to try. And to the men who did this, not one was held responsible and not one went to prison for what they did to her. Animal abuse is not less bad than human abuse. It's all evil, period. They can't speak for themselves. They can't ask for help. So it's on us to care. But if you're still here, then you still care. So thank you. You guys are like my crime solving besties. So just know you're not only watching, you're the reason why these cases are still remembered. I love you guys. I will see you in my next video. Group hug.
The circumstances surrounding the mysterious disappearance and death of Courtney Lynn Townsend are bizarre, and I need everyone to go down this rabbit hole with me. 33-year-old Courtney Townsend was last seen on November 16th of last year in Hurricane, Utah. So that day, she had taken her parents' car from their home in St. George without their permission and began driving. About a half hour before her parents reported the car stolen, Courtney was pulled over in Hurricane for speeding, and the body cam footage from the police officer showed her acting really nervous. He asked her where she was going, in which she replied Cedar City, and then he gave her a citation. But before he could leave, Courtney tried handing him a small jewelry box with an envelope folded up in the middle, but the officer said that he couldn't take it and drove off, letting her go. Now after this, Courtney vanished, but 3 days later, the car she was driving was found at a campsite in a wooded area on Cedar Mountain. It was stuck on some rocks and completely burnt to a crisp, and this was kind of in the area of Duck Creek, about 10 feet off the road. Found around the car were a bunch of items, including Navy dog tags, a wallet, and a handful of credit cards and IDs, none of which belonged to Courtney. At this point, Courtney hadn't been reported missing yet, and the car was in Kane County, a completely different jurisdiction. So the Kane County Sheriff's Office didn't know the circumstances surrounding the situation, but instead of looking further into a burned vehicle, police treated the car as arson and had it towed away, where it was quickly taken to an impound lot and destroyed. This is important to note because all potential evidence that could have been left behind in the car was now destroyed. So after a couple of weeks of no contact from Courtney, which was odd because she talked to her parents almost every day, they officially reported her missing to the St. George police on December 2nd. This is when Courtney's disappearance was connected to the burned vehicle found a few weeks prior, but at this point, police said that they couldn't do a ground search of the area until all of the snow had melted, which would likely be midsummer. While they waited, the family searched for Courtney themselves, and they even hired a private investigator, but it was like Courtney vanished into thin air and nothing was found. When police did their first initial search, it was early May, and they reportedly searched near where her car was found, searching for over 400 hours and walking over 200 miles. But they found nothing, which is odd because just a couple of weeks later, on May 27th, a person who was out riding their ATV on Cedar Mountain in the Duck Creek Ridge area stumbled across some clothing on the side of the road. This person was supposedly familiar with Courtney's disappearance, so they called police, who brought in tracking dogs, and they came across partial human remains near a water tank. When I say partial, I mean only pieces of her were found, but after comparing them to dental records, it was confirmed that they did belong to Courtney. What's sad is the fact that this was extremely close to where her burned car was found 6 months prior. So Courtney was found, but so many questions remain in this case, like how she ended up where she did, where the rest of her remains are, and how exactly she died. Okay, go to part 2. This is part 2 of the disturbing case of Courtney Lynn Townsend. According to the Utah State Medical Examiner, Courtney's cause of death couldn't be determined because of how little remains were found, and they can't tell when she died either. But what's odd is that even though there is so little evidence left behind, authorities don't suspect foul play, and the Kane County Sheriff's Office isn't even investigating her death anymore. They said that one theory is that she was driving down the road that day became high-centered on some rocks, which started a fire. And her death, however she may have died, was accidental. According to the police officer who found Courtney's car, it had snowed overnight, and when he located the car, it was cold to the touch. And there were no footprints in the snow, which means that it was burned some time before the snow fell. What needs to be investigated further is the fact that Courtney got married a month before she went missing, and according to her family and friends, the man was really abusive towards her. From an outsider's perspective, and after talking with Courtney's sister, it really seems like the police dropped the ball on this investigation, and this situation in specific. A friend of the family has gone on to hire a professional dog handler in hopes of locating more of Courtney's remains. But it wasn't what they found that was shocking, it was what they didn't. The friend didn't tell the professional they hired where the remains were found, and they did this so that they could hopefully get a fresh scent and pick up on more remains. But the dogs ended up searching the exact area where Courtney's remains were found, yet they didn't pick up on a single hit. No trace or scent of Courtney was found, which led this professional to believe that Courtney died elsewhere and the bones that were found were brought to that location by either an animal or person after the fact. Adding to this mystery is the fact that in February of this year, a backpack was found on a city truck in St. George that contained items that belonged to Courtney. She was a loving mom, and it included her kids' birth certificates as well as other personal items. At this point, it's believed that Courtney had already been dead on Cedar Mountain for some time. So how did her belongings get on this city truck so far away, and who put them there? That has never been answered, and it's one of the main reasons that Courtney's family can't get any closure. All evidence points to there being foul play, yet police aren't even investigating her death anymore, even though so many questions remain. There's a Facebook page called Justice for Courtney, which is run by her sister, and some pictures have been posted of the site where Courtney's remains were found. And it's just really creepy what has been left behind, like this plate that has sledgehammer written on it. Someone in the group also looked up the exact coordinates of where Courtney's remains were found, and what's odd is that they found Google Earth images taken the day after her car was towed. You can see the burn marks in the ground, but what others are pointing out is that it looks like a woman is standing there. But who that person is, no one knows. It looks like she has brown hair and is wearing a black hoodie and blue jeans. This could be nothing, but it just doesn't seem like a coincidence that this was taken a day after her burned car was found. I just have so many questions in this case, like who those IDs belong to that were found near the burned car, and also what was inside that envelope that Courtney tried giving to the police officer, and more importantly, where's the rest of Courtney's body? Her family has created a GoFundMe to help finance and continue this independent investigation, so I'll leave that here. It's now been 4 months since she was found, but the circumstances surrounding her death remain a mystery.
This is the story of the Carr brothers. It all started in Dodge City, Kansas. Reginald and Jonathan, who are 3 years apart. Reginald was born in 1977 and Jonathan was born in 1980. Now, their parents were very abusive and drunks. Their mother was in and out of marriages. No marriage was better than the other. At a very young age, Jonathan went through a very deep depression, feeling unloved and unwanted. He tried to kill himself by drinking antifreeze. Reginald was, everything he had. Any and everything Reginald did, Jonathan copied. The two were known for petty crimes, burglary, car theft. Reginald was in and out of jail. As you can see, here are 4 mugshots before he was even 18 years old. Now, Jonathan was younger, so all he would do is wait for his brother to get out of jail so they can commit more crimes. As the two got older, the crimes intensified. They went from petty crimes to robbing people at gunpoint. In December of 2000, the two decided to leave Dodge City to go to Wichita because in their mind, the people in Wichita have money. Their plan was to go to Wichita and follow anybody who has a nice car and rob them at gunpoint. Now, at this point, Reginald is 23 and Jonathan is 20. On December 8th, 23-year-old Andrew Schreiber is leaving the store heading back to his vehicle when he felt an object pressed to the back of his head. When he turned around, the two brothers were standing there, forcing him into the car. One brother got in the back and the other brother got into the front seat. They rolled around with Andrew and made him stop at every ATM they could. They made him withdraw money until his card stopped working. Then they took him to a vacant parking lot and shot out all his tires, and the two fled. Just 3 days later, on December 11th, Ann Walenta is on her way home, and she noticed the car is following close behind her. When she pulled into her driveway, the car kept going, so she felt relieved. But the car did a U-turn and parked in front of her house. The brothers got out and held Ann at gunpoint and asked for some money. When she seen the guns, Ann hit the reverse, and the brothers put 7 bullets into her car. Ann got weak and fell forward. Her head hit the horn. This alerted the neighbors. The brothers fled with nothing. But when the police got there, Ann had enough strength not only to talk, but to give the police a description of the brothers. At this point, the police know that the same two people committed both of these crimes, but all they have to go on is Ann and Andrew's description. Now, while all this is going on, what are the brothers doing? They ain't in hiding or nothing. They still in Wichita, chilling. They all at the mall. They meeting women, not giving a damn. On December 14th, a snowy, cold ass December 14th, the brother forced their way into a home on Birchwood Drive. Now, in the home was 5 people, all of them ranging from mid to late 20s. It's a woman that's not pictured. Her name is HD, or they was calling her Holly G. She didn't want her face or her full name out there, but she was the girlfriend of Jason. But the brothers forced everybody into one room and they started ransacking the place, and they ended up taking Jason's engagement ring to HG, which was supposed to be a surprise. He was going to propose to her in the upcoming days. When the brothers got everybody in the house in one room, things started to get twisted. They made the friends perform sex acts on each other. Then they would tie them up, and they themselves was sexually assaulting them. After that, one of the brothers took each individual to ATMs while the other brother stayed. I think it was like 3 of them that they took back and forth to the ATM. After they were done with the victims, they forced 2 of them in the trunk of their car, and they took Jason's truck and made HG drive with everybody else. They took the group to a field. Once at the field, they made everybody get in line on their knees, and they shot each one of them point blank in the back of the head, execution style. Then the 2 fled, thinking that they executed everybody, but HG was wearing some type of beret that saved her life. She was able to get up and check on her boyfriend. She actually took off her sweater to try to stop the bleeding. She realized that, it's like below 0 outside. So she traveled almost a mile in the snow trying to get to somebody's doorstep. She ended up getting to a house and knocking on the door, and that couple helped her. When the couple was on the phone with the police, HG actually took the phone and told the police, I have to get this out before I die. She clearly didn't think she was going to make it with the head wound, but she not only made it, she made it to the hospital. Even at the hospital, she was still trying to hurry up and tell her story because she did not think that she was going to make it out of surgery. After the execution, the brothers went back to the house on Birchwood to clear it out. They took anything they can, TVs, VCRs, and they loaded it up in Jason's truck. But before they left, it was a dog at the residence. They beat the dog to death. It is now 6 a.m. The crime and Jason's truck is all over Wichita's news. Somebody in the apartment complex went to the police station and said that the truck is over here. When the police got to the apartment complex, a man was standing outside and he told the police, I helped a young man carry a TV to the 3rd floor. He got that TV out of this truck. The police went up to the 3rd floor apartment and knocked on the door. A woman answered, but she only cracked the door open. When she cracked the door, the police could see the TVs, they could see the VCRs. But as she was talking to the police, Reginald is trying to sneak out the balcony. But as soon as he opens the balcony door, police was right there. They bust through the door and got Reginald on the ground. And when they searched his pockets, what did they find? Jason's credit card. All Reginald said was, I want a lawyer. But where was Jonathan? At around 12 p.m. the same day, Jonathan was also at a woman's house, but that woman lived with her mother. And when her mother seen Jonathan was there, she got suspicious. He had his jacket hanging on the doorknob, and she thought a gun was in it. So she decided to check it. As they're watching TV, Jonathan and this girl, guess who's on the news? Reginald. The girl looked at her and said, ain't this your brother? And he just like, yeah. All the while, her mother is going through his pockets. And guess what she finds? The engagement ring that Jason was going to give HG. The mother snuck out the door and called the police. Their trial started in 2002, and let me just say, they acted like they didn't give a damn. No remorse was shown. They was waving and blowing kisses at women. They was convicted on almost like 100 counts. 90 something stuck. They were sentenced to death, but in 2014, it got overturned to a life sentence because they said they shouldn't have been tried together. But in 2016, the death penalty got reinstated for the both of them. So as of today, these two are still on death row, and this is a more recent picture of them. And let me just say, they said that they be in prison sexually assaulting the men. They said they are hell on wheels in prison. Anne Walenta made it to see the brothers get arrested, but she died shortly after from her injuries. And Andrew and HG, the lady who didn't want her face or her name out there, ended up getting in a relationship, getting married, and having children. So congratulations to them. That was unexpected. I'm scared of them.
This case has so many unbelievable twists and turns that if I didn't know that this was a real life true crime case, I would have thought it was the plot from a movie. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of Franklin Floyd. On a dark, stormy evening in April 1990, a group of men were making their way to a motel just outside of Oklahoma City when they noticed a rogue blue high heel perched in the middle of the road. Just a short distance away, they would discover the body of a young woman. She was laid face down in a drain at the side of the road, and she was still alive but completely out of it. Her body was twitching, she was convulsing, and her limbs were said to be flying all over in different directions. She was quickly rushed to the hospital, where later her husband Clarence Hughes identified her as 20-year-old Tonya Hughes. Tonya was a mother of one, and her 2-year-old son Michael was her absolute world. She adored him, she doted on him, and the two of them were best friends. It initially appeared like Tonya had been the victim of a hit and run, but the more that the hospital staff were treating her, the more that story wasn't really making sense. Tonya had all sorts of different injuries, including bruising, all of which were in different stages of healing. It was clear as day that this young girl was being abused. Sadly, Tonya would die only 5 days after being rushed into the hospital. The day after she passed, her son Michael was placed into foster care, and his father Clarence fought tooth and nail to try and gain custody of him back. He was in and out of court, and while this was all going on, he was still allowed visitation, however that had to be supervised. When it was discovered that Clarence wasn't actually Michael's biological dad, every single one of his parental rights, including the visitation rights, were revoked from him. This resulted in Clarence going to the extreme. After 4 years of Michael happily living with a foster family who were only a hair away from completing the adoption process, wanting to adopt Michael, he would be kidnapped. In 1995, Clarence marched into Michael's elementary school and he was armed. He forced the head teacher at gunpoint to show him where Michael's classroom was. When the head teacher complied, he then kidnapped both Michael and the head teacher at gunpoint. The head teacher would be restrained to a tree using handcuffs in some woodland and had his mouth covered with duct tape. When he was eventually found, he quickly contacted the police and told them everything that had happened, and they began a manhunt trying to track down Clarence. But they would soon discover that Clarence Hughes wasn't who he said he was. His real name was Franklin Delano Floyd, and he was a wanted man. He had been a fugitive on the run for 17 years. Born in 1943, Franklin began getting into trouble with the police from a very early age for things including petty theft and violating his probation. However, quickly and terrifyingly, his crimes began to escalate. He would be sent to prison after being convicted of kidnapping and then sexually abusing a 4-year-old girl. While serving his sentence for this charge, he actually managed to break out of the prison and rob a bank. He ended up stealing around about $6,000. He would eventually be captured, reincarcerated, and then when he was released after serving his time, he was then incarcerated incarcerated again after he tried sexually abusing another woman. One of his friends ended up bailing him out on this occasion, and when Clarence didn't turn up to court, he had officially gone on the run. He was a wanted fugitive for 17 years. For 17 years, he was able to evade law enforcement, chopping and changing his identity wherever he fancied, wherever he went. Because he did use several aliases for the purpose of this video, I am only going to refer to him as Franklin. When looking into all of the different records from all of the different aliases, investigators made a haunting discovery. Not only was Clarence Hughes not who he claimed to be, but Tonya Hughes wasn't either. Tonya was also a fake name. Before this young girl was Tonya, Franklin's wife, she was Sharon, his daughter. And who she was before that, who she really was, what her real name is, was a complete mystery. The FBI eventually tracked Franklin down to Kentucky, where he was promptly arrested and charged with the kidnapping of Michael Hughes. The 6-year-old, however, was nowhere to be seen. The neighbours who lived in the same apartment house thing as Franklin never recalled seeing him with a child, and hauntingly, when they looked into the bus pass that he had bought when he got the bus from Oklahoma to Kentucky, they realised that he had only bought one ticket, and that ticket was for himself. He would go on to be sentenced to 52 years imprisonment for the kidnapping of Michael, and any time anyone tried to question him about Michael, asking where he was, what he had done with him, Franklin would just spit out a ton of lies. During the investigation into the kidnapping of Michael, when they were still trying to locate where he was, investigators were able to find the truck that Franklin drove, and taped underneath in almost like a file, they discovered photographs. The photographs depicted images of a young girl who was being horrifically abused. She was bound and she was beaten black and blue. The investigators even said that there was no way that this girl could have been beaten to this extent and not been killed by Franklin. This information was shared across several different agencies across several different states that Franklin was known to frequent, and one state in particular, one agency in particular, this piqued their interest. In Tampa, Florida, there was a Jane Doe whose skeletal remains had already been recovered from the side of the road. Somehow, they were able to determine that the bound and beaten woman inside of these photographs and the Jane Doe from Tampa, Florida were the same person, and her name was Cheryl Ann Comenso. Cheryl was an 18-year-old girl with big dreams. She worked as a dancer inside of one of Tampa, Florida's biggest adult entertainment clubs, and she dreamed of making it big in the modelling world. For her, working inside of this club was just like a stepping stone for where she wanted to be, and where she wanted to be was on the cover of Playboy magazine. However, she would never get the chance to fulfill those dreams before she was murdered by Franklin Floyd. Her skull had 2 bullet holes in it, and it was determined that the shooting, along with the beating, which they now had photographic evidence of, was her cause of death. 2 shots to the head, along with being barbarically beaten. In 2002, Franklin was charged and convicted of the murder of Cheryl Ann Comenso, and for this, he was handed the death penalty. I do hate to do this, and I haven't done it in the longest time, but because this case is such a long one, I have had to break it up into 2 parts, and part 2 is ready for you to watch on my profile right now. She was kidnapped at the age of 5 and raised by her captor, who went on to marry her, and after she died under suspicious circumstances, her son was then kidnapped. To this day, he has never been found. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of Suzanne Savakis. This is a continuation from my previous video. In 1974, Sandy Chipman was a single mother to 4 children who was struggling with her mental health. She was suffering with PTSD and was preparing for the likelihood that she was about to lose custody of her children, which upset her terribly. She said that she was so upset that she just cried constantly, and one day, while she was sat in church while she was crying, she was approached by a man who introduced himself as Brandon Williams. This man sat beside her and showed her kindness, asking what was wrong, is she okay, how could he help? Sandy and Brandon dated for around about a month before they got married, and with Brandon's help, Sandy was able to regain custody of all of her children. In 1975, Sandy would actually end up spending 30 days in jail after she was caught writing bad checks at the supermarket. So while she was serving her time, her children were left in the care of Brandon. But when she was released after serving her 30 days, Brandon and the children were nowhere to be seen. The two younger girls would be found in an orphanage/care home, but her oldest daughter, Suzanne, who was 5 years old, was gone. Sandy went to the police and tried to report her daughter as being kidnapped. However, the officers told her that because she was legally married to Brandon, he was their stepfather, he had rights, and if he wanted to just take off with her, he could. Couldn't find anything else on what else Sandy did to try and find her daughter. Not Sandy or the police had any idea that Brandon Williams was actually Franklin Delano Floyd, a wanted man who had a history of kidnapping and sexually abusing young girls. Over the next couple of years, Franklin and Suzanne would go from state to state, living under different identities. By the time she was in high school, Suzanne was going by the name Sharon Marshall. Friends of hers from school would describe her in all of the best ways. She was beautiful, she was funny, she was kind, and she was incredibly smart. She had dreams of becoming an aerospace engineer, and she actually managed to secure a full scholarship at Georgia Tech, which was her dream. She was so excited to go to college and eventually end up working for NASA. She had worked her absolute backside off for this, and she was so excited to reap the benefits of it. Despite how much everyone loved Sharon, they all thought that her father Warren was incredibly strange. Sharon couldn't give her number out to anyone, and a lot of the time wherever she went, her father Warren followed. One of her closest friends described how she wasn't allowed to sleep over at Sharon's house. However, when her dad went away for the weekend, her mum finally gave in, let her go sleep at Sharon's, only for her to end up witnessing Suzanne being raped by Franklin at gunpoint. Throughout the entire time period of Suzanne being kidnapped by Franklin, she was physically, sexually, mentally, and emotionally abused by him. He had managed to scare her into submission, into silence and obedience, and she would have felt like she had no way out. She had been conditioned to believe that from being only 5 years old. Suzanne would also do everything for Franklin, and she followed a very strict schedule. No matter what she was doing, whether she was with a friend, a boyfriend, an after-school club, she had to be home by 4:30 so that she could clean up and make Franklin his tea. She cooked for him, cleaned up after him, and did everything for him, including giving him massages every single night to help his arthritis. Despite how hard she had worked for this opportunity, there was no way that Franklin was going to allow Suzanne to go to Georgia Tech, to go to college where he was out of her control, out of his eyesight. She was never going to be able to follow her dreams and live the life that she deserved. She would end up falling pregnant and giving birth to her son Michael, who she absolutely adored. Immediately, Franklin began using Michael as a tool to maintain his control over Suzanne. Suzanne absolutely adored Michael, and there wasn't a hope in hell's chance that she was going to leave Michael. And if she wanted to get away, she couldn't take Michael with her because he was never out of Franklin's sight. The three would end up moving to Tampa, and this is when Suzanne was forced into working within the adult entertainment industry. She would work in one of the biggest clubs in Tampa, Florida, and that is where she met Cheryl Ann Comenso, who Franklin would eventually go on to murder, something that I detailed in my previous video. After the murder, Franklin, Suzanne and Michael quickly fled, and knowing that the authorities were going to be looking for a father, his daughter and their grandson, Franklin and Suzanne once again changed their names, changing their identity, now becoming Clarence and Tonya and going on to get married. These two names were actually names that they picked after strolling through a cemetery, picking the names off of headstones. In April 1990, 20-year-old Suzanne would be found on the side of the road, the victim of an apparent hit and run, and she would die in the hospital 5 days later. Again, in my previous video, I go more in depth on what happened following this. After being sentenced to death for the murder of Cheryl Comenso in 2002, the FBI decided that they were going to try and talk to Franklin again about the kidnapping of Michael. By the time they sat down with him again, Michael had been missing for 19 years, and they thought maybe with the passage of time, Franklin would be open to speaking to say where Michael was or what happened to him. And initially, he wasn't going to let up. But after days of intense interrogation, he finally confessed, saying that he had, quote, shot him twice in the back of the head to make it real quick. That happened the day that 6-year-old Michael was kidnapped from his school. Franklin had kidnapped him, took him away from a loving family who was so close to adopting him, only to kill him. Michael's body to this day has never been found. After learning about the case, an investigative journalist became extremely interested in it, specifically wanting to figure out who Tonya Hughes really was. At this point, no one had any idea who she actually was or where she came from. Knowing Franklin's history, there was a belief that she was a kidnapped girl. The author wasn't able to figure out her identity, but he went ahead and published A Beautiful Child anyway. After this, a woman named Megan came forward, as she believed that her biological mother was Suzanne or Tonya. Megan was adopted as a newborn, and her adoptive mother actually met Suzanne and Franklin before Suzanne gave birth to Megan, and when she came across this book, suddenly all of the pieces fit together. Megan submitted her DNA, and through this testing, finally 39 years after she was kidnapped, Suzanne Savakis got her name back. She was finally identified. In 2023, 79-year-old Franklin Floyd died by natural causes while sat on death row. Even before his death, he never revealed what really happened to Suzanne and if he had any involvement in her suspicious death.